We're going to call this meeting to order tonight, and I'm Andrew Johnston. I'll be conducting the meeting, and will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you very much. We would like to welcome each of you to our City Council meeting this evening. We appreciate that you have taken time out of your day to attend our meeting, to participate and see your local government at work. To start the meeting, we have laid out some guidelines for decorum and civility to make sure people feel comfortable and safe to participate. Please be respectful during other people's comments. Avoid cheering, jeering, snapping fingers, or any other disruptive noise that could cause someone to feel intimidated. Please also help take care of this historic meeting room by not standing on the furniture or leaning against the decorative pieces. If you have a sign, a prop, or other piece of equipment, I don't know if we have any tonight. If you have any of those things, video equipment, et cetera, please make sure that it does not cause disruption or block other people's views. And signs wider than your chair should be displayed in the hall, please. Also, items like sticks and dowels are not allowed. Please do not approach the dais up here. If you have something to pass out to the council, a staff member can assist you. Who are the staff members here tonight? If you raise your hands. Side over here. Okay. Actually, if you have any other questions tonight throughout the meetings, you need some assistance, the staff members can help you out with any of those things. And just raise your hand so they know to come in and help you out. Also, we recognize that 2 minutes of comment time may not be long enough to get all of your thoughts outlined tonight. Please visit our website, slcouncil.com, or refer to the contact information sheets by the speaker cards for information about other ways to share your comments with the council via email, phone, or mail. I'll probably reiterate this later, too. During our public comment time, we do ask to limit it to 2 minutes each. I know it's not a lot of time, but with this many people, I'll make sure everyone gets a chance tonight. I have been accused of being a little too lenient about that in the past, so I apologize to those of you who have taken more than 2 minutes of time. But tonight, I'm going to have to cut you off at 2 minutes. Over here, you'll hear a little beeper, and Cindy or somebody will just remind you your 2 minutes are up. I would ask you to finish your sentence you're on and then let somebody else speak. So don't take it personally if I do cut you off. I apologize in advance. Okay, to begin with tonight, we are going to do item A3, approval of minutes for the work session meetings minutes of Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019, Tuesday, September 24th, 2019, and Tuesday, October 8th, 2019, as well as the formal meeting minutes of Tuesday, October 8th, 2019, and Tuesday, October 15th, 2019.
So moved.
We have a motion by Councilmember Fowler, second by Councilmember Luke, I believe. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Next is item A5 regarding a ceremonial resolution declaring November as Native American Heritage Month in Salt Lake City. I will turn the time over to Councilmember Luke to read the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A little bit of context on this. We've done this before, but what we're going to do this year is a little bit different from what we've done in the past. This will become an annual resolution where we will do the same thing which we traditionally do with December being Utah AIDS Month. We're going to be declaring every November moving forward as Native American Heritage Month in Salt Lake City. So I'll read the resolution right now, and then Marana Benali, and you can bring your group up, and then we'll do a ceremonial photo. Resolution declaring November Native American Heritage Month in Salt Lake City. Whereas the more than 2,000 Native Americans residing within Salt Lake City are a unique and diverse population representing many tribal nations and their cultural values, celebrations, and achievements. And whereas Salt Lake City is built on homelands of the Northwestern Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute, who have called the Salt Lake Valley and the Wasatch Range home and have been stewards of the land for thousands of years. And whereas Native Americans have contributed to the prosperity of Salt Lake City through treaties, resources, lands, culture, traditions, and commerce. And whereas we honor and celebrate the importance of Native Americans and their immeasurable contributions to our city and to our society, distinguishing themselves as scholars, veterans, teachers, athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, and leaders. And whereas we strive to improve communications with, services to, and partnership with all city residents as we journey together on a quest for justice, equality, respect, and prosperity. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Salt Lake City Council declares the month of November each year Native American Heritage Month, adopted this day, the 12th of November, 2019. So, Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the resolution.
We have a motion by Councilmember Luke and a second by Councilmember Fowler. Any discussion on this?
I just want to thank Moroni Benali for his work on this and his advocacy and outreach, and we're happy to work with you.
I agree. All right. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Moroni, if you want to come up front, and we'll have the photo.
Smile, everyone. I'll go with this. 3, 2.
Okay. No, I need to move. Sorry. Okay. All right. Okay, here. You go, all right? Say, puppies. Cheese. Anybody else want photos? Go ahead. Okay, I got one. No. Anybody else? Okay, we're good, thank you.
I did fail to do two things. One was to excuse council members Mendenhall and Wharton, who are both unavailable tonight. The second thing is for anyone who parked in the underground library parking garage, we do have validations for you. If you see a member of our staff, they can get one for you tonight. We will now hold the public hearing portion of our meeting. We have a few opportunities for public comment tonight, and we'll call people based on the comment cards that have been turned in. I will call people two at a time. The first person, please come forward to the microphone, and the second person, please be ready to follow. Comment time is limited again to 2 minutes per person, and you cannot combine time with another speaker. And as a reminder, please create a civil and respectful meeting by not making loud noises or other disruptions, not blocking people's views. And if you have things to pass out actually to us, our staff members can pick it up and hand it to us as well. Just let us know. We have some comment cards, I believe. Thank you. The first hearing is B1 regarding an ordinance to rezone a property at 1937 South and 12 East from RMF 35 moderate density multifamily to RMF 45 moderate density multifamily. And I'm going to call folks up again, like I said. If you filled out a comment card and I call it now, but you actually want to speak to something other than this item, just let me know and we can put it in our next public comment period. First up tonight is Judy Short, followed by Lynn Schwartz, I believe.
Good evening. My name is Judy Short. I'm the Land Use Chair for the Sugarhouse Community Council. The developer of the parcel 1937 South 1200 East said that one of the reasons he wanted to tear the house down and build apartments was because the house, which is a wonderful bungalow of Sugarhouse, was an outlier on the street because all the rest are apartments. And I'm sure that house was there before any of the apartments were there. Perhaps the ward across the street or Irving School might have been there. But I'm sure the house was not the outlier, it's the apartments. 1200 East already has more people on it and cars than the street will hold. One of the parcels to be redeveloped actually holds paid parking, 25 spaces for people who live in the Irving Heights apartment. That will disappear under this redevelopment, and then there'll be 25 cars hunting for no spaces on the street. So adding another apartment doesn't seem feasible to us. The people who live in the neighborhood have talked about their quality of life. They feel like their children can't play in the front yards of their street, and they don't feel comfortable walking to Sugarhouse to run errands. So they actually drive their car, if you can imagine, into the heart of Sugarhouse from 12th East or Ramona, because the traffic is so fast and so frequent that they don't feel safe. So I don't think adding another apartment building and more people is a good solution. Even if this doesn't get rezoned, there'll still be, I think, something like 12 units. So this is only going to be a few extra units for rezoning that parcel, and none of them will be affordable. So I'm asking you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Short. Lynn Schwartz, followed by Finn Epperson Vaughn, I believe.
Hi, I'm Lynn Schwartz, Vice Chair, Sugarhouse Community Council Land Use and Zoning Committee. What we don't want to see is a line of 45-foot buildings marching down 12th East, or for any of the side streets, for that matter, that have managed to escape this fate. A mix of low-rise apartments and single-family houses will keep a rapidly disappearing sense of livable scale in existence, a bulwark, if you will, against the continued mollification of Sugarhouse. Parking and traffic are an issue now and will only be exacerbated by the increase in density that will occur even with the existing zoning, not to speak of even more cars with a larger project. This is an issue of a community and a larger issue of community itself. It is time for all participants in the community to act as if it is a community and not a commodity from which to wring the last penny of profit. There is no groundswell for more luxury housing from the community. There is a crying need for affordable housing so that folks who work in all these chain stores can actually afford to live in their community. There is no reason that there cannot be a mix of both high-priced and affordable, even in the same project. The Liberty Village project has done this successfully, so it is not a pie-in-the-sky idea, but I digress. The existing zoning was enacted with this level of density for a reason, and that reasoning still holds. I ask that you accept the decision of the Planning Commission and reject the rezone.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Finn Epperson Vaughn, followed by Layla Dorit, I believe. Finn first, and then second one is Layla.
All right. To those involved in the decision process to close the road home, Utah Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, Utah House of Representatives Speaker Brad Wilson, Utah State Senate President Stuart Adams, Salt Lake County Mayor Jenny Wilson, South Salt Lake Mayor Cherry Wood, Salt Lake City Mayor Jackie Biskupski, Salt Lake City Deputy Chief of Staff David Litvak, Police Chief Mike Brown, and to the Salt Lake City Council members present today, as well as those that couldn't make it today. As you should be aware, temperatures are dropping and the most marginalized members of our community, the community that you took an oath to represent, are being turned away from the new shelters, as they have 400 fewer beds than the road home's existing capacity. Despite public pressure to keep the road home open, this council and the state government have planned to shut it down as the final part of Operation Rio Grande. This is an attack on the homeless population in Salt Lake City, and we are demanding that you immediately take the following action. 1, keep the road home open through April. 2, have at a minimum the equivalent number of beds made readily available and accessible prior to closing the road home. 3, no arrests, tickets, or harassment for campers until at least the equivalent number of beds are made readily available. 4, change the existing legislation to allow for the new centers to have more beds. And 5, free public transit fare for all people who stay in shelters. A 10-page report from the American Civil Liberties Union of Utah was released the first week of November 2019. In this report, the long-term damages of Operation Rio Grande are assessed, and it finds that the operation was a disaster. The report noted that the impact of arrests and fines do not easily vanish from the people's list of troubles, especially those with limited resources, but reverberate, often for low-level offenses including camping, jaywalking, and open container violations. Nonviolent misdemeanors that lead to arrest warrants often serve as barriers to services, housing, and jobs. In other words, Operation Rio Grande not only failed with its intent to restore the order and safety for those experiencing homelessness, but is a clear example of negligence and incompetence on the part of those involved in creating and implementing policies that don't involve the input and direction of the community they claim to serve.
Thank you.
We
Your
will
time
stand
is up.
by this no longer.
Thank you for your comments. Ladies and gentlemen, I asked you at the very beginning to please be respectful of our time tonight. I understand. All right. We have a lot of people who want to speak tonight. I'd like to give everybody a chance to speak. We are speaking about a specific zoning issue in Sugarhouse. We have time to speak about the road home during our general comments section as well. If that's okay with you all, if you want to speak of the road home and you have put a pink card in, can you just let me know, and I'll put it in the stack for the road home discussion. And then folks who want to speak about the zoning issue, we can get through the zoning issue. Is that okay? Layla is next up.
Okay, Andrew, we're going to respect people's bodies right now, okay? So it is all your responsibility, along with the state government, to take care of unsheltered members of our community. And we are calling on you to accept and immediately implement these demands as the first step in a long fight to end homelessness in Salt Lake City. The adoption of these demands will be undoubtedly save lives this winter, since people will be able to go to the shelter to stay warm and safe from dangerously low temperatures. If the plan to close the roads home proceeds, people will die, and that is something that this community will not accept. And this is endorsed by Black Lives Matter Utah, Civil Riot, Decarcerate Utah, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, Justice for Cody, Party for Socialism and Liberation, Salt Lake Democratic Socialist, Union for Street Solidarity, University of Utah Students for a Democratic Society, Utah Against Police Brutality, Utah State Democratic Progressive Caucus, and Viva la Migra, right? And Johnson, we also understand that you guys support the opening of keeping it over the winter, but you know, prayers and written support don't save lives. So we need you guys to do what we're doing and take action and go speak to the people that do have the power. You guys have the political power to make things happen. And resources. So we need you guys to show up, man. Show up for the community. Not show up like Operation Rio Grande style, but show up community style, right? And Just one last thing. You know, I'm in recovery, right? And I work down there. I'm with Utah Harm Reduction Coalition. We work with IV drug users, right? I'm going to say one last thing.
Okay.
And the thing I've learned about recovery that taught me anything else is that you leave a community better than you found it.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. We want to hear from everybody tonight, and I can't keep having interruptions if we're going to do this. Is that okay if we respect everyone's time? Otherwise, I have to pull us out of the room basically at this point. So please respect each other's time. We'll move through these. Everyone have a chance to speak tonight. Hear everybody out.
Passionate about this, though. Woo!
Okay, I'm asking you one more time. We're listening to you. Ned Scanchi, followed by Darren Mano.
Okay, I'm the applicant for the zone change.
Okay.
And I think what we're hearing a lot tonight is that we do need more housing. And currently our... Well, currently, so
Good segue, right?
So I'm saying is currently the zoning that we have in the city is restraining the amount of housing that's provided. And whether that housing is provided, we need to provide it to all people, but the zoning is restraining it. So Sugarhouse, in the area that we're proposing building more apartments, is an area that already has apartments. We want to keep density where density belongs and not encroach on other single-family home areas. So this area has, the block that it's on is probably 80% apartments, and there's 3 or 4 single-family homes. So we're suggesting we make better use of the land and produce more units in this area. So that's why I would ask you to support the zoning change so that we have more units in this area. Thank you.
Thanks, Ned. Darren, followed by Janae Wallace, I believe.
So I just want to say thank you to the council for the time on this, and obviously there's other issues that everyone's very passionate about, and I'm really glad that the public is here to speak about those as well. I just want to say that we've tried really hard to design a project that we think is appropriate for the area, also will add housing, and we've tried to do it in a way that's respectful of the scale of both the single family and the larger scale developments close by. And we really hope that this will be a small piece of helping solve the housing crisis. So thank you for your time, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Janae Wallace.
Hi, thank you. I live in the property that's just to the north of this area, so obviously I have personal issues, but I'm concerned about the demolition of the place and the dust and all the things that will happen with construction. But there's so much traffic, you guys, on the street. It's crazy. And already right now I share a driveway with my neighbor to the north, and it's almost impossible to get out. It's almost like 1700 South trying to get out. I have also a hydrant in front of my place, and garbage hasn't been taken out a couple of times. There have been times where the garbage man won't take the garbage cans because there's so much cars in front of my house. And so that's an unsanitary condition. With, you know, I'm having to call the city and say, hey, I need my garbage pails taken out. I have to wheel my garbage back into the driveway. Oftentimes, because it's so compact, getting out of my driveway is almost impossible because whoever is parking in front of my house has a little bit this way over my driveway, and I am unable to get out, or I have to scooch really hard. I take public transportation, and I bike most of the time. I took public transportation down here tonight. But it's still an issue when I do need to get out of the house. Okay, so there's an issue with my garbage cans, and the traffic is just crazy, and I can't imagine an additional more parking spaces in the place adjacent to mine, not to mention not having the sunshine go into my home. So I'm really concerned about that. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. George Chapman. Want to speak to this, George?
Regarding the rezoning of the property on 1200 East, I'm urging you not to rezone it. I attended the zoning meeting where the community were furious about the traffic already. they can't see increasing density in that area. It already has apartments, it already has single-family homes, and it does have character. But you're talking about destroying the character of a neighborhood, significantly increasing parking requirements on the street, and they can't get out of the neighborhood right now. There's only one real street to get into, 11th East or 21st South, and that's Ramona. And it's backed up in the morning, and you can't get out even in the evening, during the evening rush hour. So you're asking a community to undertake the burdens of the worst case scenario for gentrification. It's not worth it, and it doesn't really solve any of the problems. It doesn't put density where it really is required on a high transportation viable street. These are very small streets. You can't even put a streetcar up it. So please don't rezone the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this rezoning issue? Okay, seeing none, I will look to a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we close the public hearing and defer action to a future night.
We have a motion by Councilmember Luke, second by Councilmember Rogers. Any discussion on this? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Our second public hearing tonight is B2 regarding an ordinance amendment to the city's consolidated fee schedule for Class 7 sewer rate. Do we have any public comment on this tonight? Any cards? No cards? Anybody wish to speak to this one? Okay, seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the council close the public hearing and defer action to a future council meeting.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Rogers, a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion passes. Our next public hearing is item B3 regarding an ordinance for the Second Amendment to the final budget of Salt Lake City, including the employment staffing document for fiscal year 2019-2020. I do have some cards here on this item. Sarah Edelman first, followed by Jason Stevenson.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Adelman, and I am the chair of the Liberty Wells Community Council. And I specifically want to address the budget amendment that would provide additional funding for overtime for Salt Lake City police officers for park patrol. First, I want to be clear that individuals in crisis are not criminals. Homelessness is not a crime, and addressing homelessness is a complex issue that requires a diverse set of solutions, most notably meaningful services. However, over the past 2 years, Liberty Park users have observed an increase in overnight camping, drug use, and conflict in the park. The Liberty Wells Community Council has engaged on this issue through a community-wide survey and several meetings with community members and city stakeholders. For example, on September 4th, we were joined by 3 other community councils, several residents in the community, for a meeting with the police department to address questions relating to patrolling and public safety in Liberty Park. When something goes wrong in a public space like Liberty Park, all community members benefit from access to public safety resources. The budget amendment request for additional overtime hours to patrol city parks can help address one facet of a complex issue. It's not the only solution, but it is a part of the solution. I echo the questions the council has put forward regarding this budget amendment request, and pending the answers to these questions, I support the budget amendment request. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason Stevenson, followed by Margaret Holloway.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the council. I'm Jason Stevenson. I'm the co-chair of the East Liberty Park Community Organization. And actually, Sarah and I wanted to speak together and in tandem because we worked together on this issue, meeting back in September with the community councils around Liberty Park to figure out how we could thread the needle on this issue. It's a complex issue. As Sarah mentioned, we don't think that we can arrest our way out of homelessness or any of the social issues that are associated with it. So it's a tricky thing, and what we figured out was that community councils often hear both sides. We hear from the vigilante side, which says, you know, we're going to go patrol the park on our own, and we're going to kick people out. We get those comments at our community council meetings. We also hear, or actually the other option is just simply do nothing and hope for the best. We feel that the second budget amendment, the overtime that can be allocated to Salt Lake City Police to address this issue, is a good step at trying to solve this issue, trying to thread the needle. But it does need some guardrails as well. One I would recommend would be that the police department liaison with those community councils around Liberty Park to stay informed about how it's going, what we're hearing from our residents, what they can improve, what we can adapt to make it work better as the process goes forward. The second is that we would request that the Salt Lake City Police use the co-responder model that they've used throughout the city, which matches police officers with social workers so they can address the issues that people have and move them towards the solutions that they need. And one reason that we think that this could work effectively in the parks is that people go to the parks because they don't want to be found. They don't want to be, you know, helped in some regard. And it's also a place that the hard to reach end up. So if we can use the co-responder model to reach out to these hard cases, teach them about what the new homeless resource centers are doing, let them know that the rumors that if you have warrants or you have probation, you know, that the door isn't closed to you at these resource centers, which we find is something that a lot of people wrongly believe. Then we can start to turn the corner, as you heard about this afternoon during your work session, on addressing these issues. So I support the second budget amendment with those guardrails that I mentioned to make sure that we make it work better. Thanks.
Thank you. Margaret Holloway, followed by George Chapman.
I'm in favor of the police budget increase, but not for park patrol. Rose Park has been getting hit by gang wars going over there this last summer. We had 2 shootings last night. We had 27 bullets in the house the last time I spoke, which I was pretty upset. We had 6 confirmed shootings over there last month. That doesn't include the 6 shootings that they had earlier this summer that they actually caught the guy that was going around shooting in our neighborhood. I understand trespassers or campers in the park, but we actually had bullets flying over there. 2 houses on either side of me got shot up, okay? No, you just spent $4 million on 100 new police cars. There are three police cameras in this entire city. We had 3 officers come to our last community meeting, and one of them says, well, they're just shooting through the moonroof. They're not actually shooting anything. Well, when you're hearing those guns go off, you don't know where the heck they're shooting. You don't know if it's at the house. You don't know. And they said, well, you need to learn how to better describe the car. It's at midnight. How many people can see? Well, you're just saying it's a black car. How are we supposed to know? Riverside Park seems to be the Ames where they're hitting them. Bam, 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 bam. Oh, that must be a backfire. No, 5 shots is not a backfire. But we keep getting told how our district is lowest in crime. That's because there's 1,000 apartments over there between 9th West and I-15 that is not in our district. The police were over there last night. There were shootings there last night, okay? I understand you want park patrol. I understand you want to circle this, but we got bullets flying over in our area, and by golly, we're sick of it, and it's only within a mile radius. So if we had more police cameras, and I understand, oh, they'll see the camera, then they won't be driving by, but that's our only way to catch these cars, because you can have an officer over there, an officer over there, and if they come down the other street and they're shooting off, they're not seeing who it is. They're absolutely not seeing it, and we're absolutely fed up with it.
Thank you. George Chapman, followed by Crystal Young Otterstrom.
I'm in support of the budget amendment. I urge you to support it, and I urge you to give the police department plenty of flexibility on patrolling parks. I know the discussion and the concern you've expressed about cops in uniform creating an uncomfortable feeling for some demographics. That doesn't make sense. If the first experience, in a kid's life or a person's life with a cop is during a crime our society is not working. People should be able to see a cop and not worrying about being hassled. And in a park,
Please respect his time.
and in a park, we want cops that are not trying to hassle anybody. They're just trying to understand what's going on. And in a park, we've had problems with criminal behavior that actually threatens the homeless more than the regular citizens that are around the park. The citizens see it, they call, but the homeless have nothing to do about it. They get victimized too. And the only way to stop it is to have regular police patrols, whatever the police chief thinks is necessary, in uniform, to patrol the parks so that the homeless that are there aren't victimized by people who actually search out homeless to make victims. They're easy victims. And that's why we want walking patrols with cops in parks. I also need to remind you that Fairmont Park, the skate park, is selling a lot of drugs. The THC vaping cartridges, they're coming from there. That's why the police department wants Fairmont Park, Liberty Park, and Sugarhouse Park taken care of with park patrols. It makes sense. So please approve the budget amendment. And remember, it's not just people that are victimized by criminals. More than people,
Time's up.
it's homeless that are victimized by criminals. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Oh, please respect their time. Crystal Otterstrom Young, Young Otterstrom, sorry. And then Bernie Hart.
Thank you. Bit of a change of subject, but I'm here to speak to the public art components of Budget Amendment 2 and urge you to pass those. As we all know, the arts inspire and let us think critically about our stories and bring our communities and define our communities. And Salt Lake City has a long history of putting these art in public places so that all Salt Lake City citizens can be a part of them. But what we haven't had is the funds to be able to protect these pieces and work on them when they are in trouble from damage or weather, or even sometimes a car accident has damaged some of them as well. And so we're so thankful that you are finally putting attention to this issue of maintenance for the public art funds. And I hope that long term that you'll consider making that a permanent fund for public art. But thank you so much for supporting arts in Salt Lake City.
Thank you. Bernie Hart. Bernie's the last card that I have. If anybody else would like to speak to this particular item, please raise your hand and we can get you a card.
Good evening. It's been a while since I've been here. Thanks for the public hearing. The session this afternoon was really informative. And if I got one thing out of that session, was one of the things that the End Homelessness Forever and VOA and David Litvak and the mayor's office put out there was outreach, 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 outreach. And I remember being at a meeting in our community council, was it 3 or 4 months ago, David? Where I was told that the VOA outreach program was going to take care of the problem, deal with the homeless issue, and make it more comfortable for people around the library. I work with the homeless every day. I would like to see outreach in the city that is actually effective and works in dealing with the homeless issue effectively. I would like to ask the people or the council to hold the people accountable that you fund for outreach and see that what they're doing is effective and they actually solve problems. Because if they did, and the system was able to help the homeless and transition them into things and programs that worked, you wouldn't be having this discussion right now. Please hold people accountable for what they say they can do. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 more cards. Abhi Harikumar. I apologize. Thanks, Abhi. And then I believe Marvin Olivares.
Hi, my name's Abhi. Basically, I wanted to talk about the budget amendment. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to increase policing, especially in Liberty Park, if we're going to have to try to deal with, first of all, what's currently being referred to as the homeless problem, because if the homeless shelter does end up closing down, what is your plan? Where are you going to be sending these people? On top of that, they aren't really doing anything to affect you. If certain individuals feel unsafe going to the park, then don't go to the park at that point, because these people who have to end up residing at the park literally have nowhere else to go. So if you're going to send extra police forces to go in and threaten them and kick them out, then you're not going to be able to actually solve anything. You're just leading to a loss of value of human life. So on top of that, if you're going to increase additional funding to police officers, you're going to have to also ask yourself, what does policing look like for different marginalized groups, for people of color, for queer folks? How is policing going to affect them differently? Just putting a blanket statement and saying, like, oh, we're just going to increase funding to these police officers could actually lead to a lot more humans being harmed. So on top of that, I think it's really awesome that this is being used to help increase art funding, because I'm a big proponent of the arts, but the thing is, if you're not keeping your public safe, if people are not reliably safe around police officers, there's going to be no one around to really enjoy that art. So.
Thank you. Marvin? Ladies and gentlemen, please. Marvin, time is yours.
So what I've gathered so far, I've actually attended the meeting, the fact-finding meeting, I think you guys termed it, earlier today. And what I've kind of seen here is there's conversation about expanding budgets in regards to policing Liberty Park. What I recently also heard about was expanding a grant to the police station, which was publicized about less lethal weapons. I believe it was a $330,000 grant that they publicized about upgrading less lethal weapons, which we all know here that they rarely, if ever, use as is. And what that broke down to is percentage-wise, although the narrative was for less lethal options, it broke down to 7.5% of that budget was going to be used for these less lethal options. Majority of that budget was actually going to be ended up being used for a mobile command center, for surveillance software. So that's what the real conversation probably should have spoke on. And if you start to incorporate this conversation together on both fronts, you're talking about expanding policing on a place where a lot of unsheltered residents currently reside, and also on the back end, funding more surveillance, as well as over $50,000 of that funding is going to other agencies like Unified and some other agencies, which we don't know what they're doing with that money. So what this picture that's being painted, in my eyes, is a replica of Operation Rio Grande just being described as something else. And with the conversation from the ACLU being very definitive and based on factual data, you all were there, and I hope you all really compassionately took that to heart and considered that, because criminalizing the homeless here, they are some of the most likely people to encounter police in their day-to-day lives. We also know more police means more deaths at the hands of police. We will not stand for that. So I will ask, do you endorse and accept the letter that was presented to you earlier?
Thank you, Marvin, for your time.
Do you accept and endorse the letter that was presented and recited earlier?
Your 2 minutes is up, Mr. Marvin.
Is that an answer?
We've asked you to respect the 2-minute time.
Okay, will you have an equivalent number of beds made readily available and accessible prior to closing the road home?
Marvin, we've had 2 minutes. Your time is up. Can we move on to our next person, please?
Will you help
Otherwise, we're going to have to, I'm going to have to recess if we can't move on. Sorry. Thank you. I'm around after every meeting. I can talk to whoever would like to as well, which is like. Our next up is Sam Huntington. Excuse me. I might have 2 names on here. I'm sorry. Sam, are you on this? You? Okay. Followed by Eric Parkinson.
Good evening. My name is Sam Huntington, and I'm a resident of Salt Lake City. Regarding extra funding for overtime for the police to police Liberty Park. I think it's been said here tonight that policing really just isn't the answer. We don't need more police in Liberty Park because ultimately, I don't have statistics on hand, but I would presume, and I believe many members of the public would presume that that the majority of police interactions in Liberty Park happen between police and members who utilize that park as a place of habitation. So tying that in with part 3 on the letter that had been presented to you, no arrest, tickets, or harassment for campers. Ultimately, I think that's what the majority of this problem, which it's not a problem. The majority of, well, it is a problem. I'm rambling. Ultimately, more police isn't the answer. This money would be more effectively spent providing more services, opening more beds this winter to allow these people to have places of shelter. And before I sit down, I would just like to address something that the gentleman in the brown coat over here had said. I don't remember an exact quote, but he had made a differentiation between people and the homeless. And I would like to say, quite frankly, sir, that's bullshit.
Thank you, Sam. Eric Parkinson. And Eric is the last card I have, I'm sorry. If anybody else like to speak, please raise your hand. Go ahead, Eric.
With all, apologies, I'm still coming over cold. With all due respect to the community members of the Liberty Park community, I think while the sentiment of increasing police outreach in the interest of helping people is well-intentioned, I think that it has been pretty clearly demonstrated over the last several years that operations by the police to try and address homelessness has simply been ineffective. So putting more money into the pockets of police officers to try and address homelessness is effectively just criminalizing homelessness. On the other hand, putting that money towards keeping homes where these people aren't in a park outside in the winter seems more effective all around. So I would just urge figuring out a more effective use of those funds.
Thank you. Would you like to speak? Can we get a card after you speak? Just make sure you say your name when you come up.
I'm Diego Avalos. Hello. I am Diego Avalos with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. In response to the impending road home closure, as well as the police fund issue, I would like to advocate against that, as it would lead to a criminalization of homelessness, a crime that is not supposed to be considered a crime, and that you must respect people who have no other choice but to find refuge wherever they can, and that as a person of color, along with other people that I can speak for, funding the police and make them more powerful is only going to make the situation worse for us. We are in crisis, and we need solution and response now. Will you endorse the letter that was stated earlier? Will you have, at a minimum, the equivalent number of beds made readily available and accessible prior to closing the road home? Will you make sure there is no arrest, tickets, or harassment for campers until at least the equivalent number of beds are made readily available? Will you change the existing legislation to allow for the new centers to have more beds? Will you make sure there's free public transit fare for all people who stay in shelters? Please, it is a simple yes or no question. What is your response to that?
During those sessions, we don't have the back and forth on this formal meeting.
What will you do? What will you do?
Thank you, Diego.
What will you do?
Ladies and gentlemen,
What will you do?
we're going to recess. We're going to recess this meeting. Go out. We'll be back when it calms down. We're going to recess this meeting till further notice. Okay, we're going to come out of recess. One thing I love about this is we can have free speech, and we encourage that here, and we open it up as long as it's not damaging to the building or to each other, and we respect each other's time, even if we disagree. So, Charlie, if you have something statement to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the chair of the Salt Lake City Council, I'll read the statement on our behalf. The City Council has been open to communication and hard conversations regarding homelessness and issues surrounding the closure of the road home, including a 4-hour work session meeting held today, held with various members of the state, county, city administration, and community organizations dedicated to helping people experiencing homelessness. But it is hard to continue a conversation when there is no respect, yelling, and disregard of the many efforts of all involved, including the council, to help our less fortunate neighbors. We plead with you to have an orderly meeting to continue with the items that are part of the solutions to help our homeless neighbors. The demands that are being requested are all things we agree with, but that we have little control over, at least by ourselves. We can certainly work with and ask UTA to collaborate with the resource centers to provide free fare. We have talked about looking into our criminal code. We are looking into all options to address this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're going to continue on. We are on item B3 when we recessed, which was the budget amendment number 2 for the fiscal year. I actually believe we got through all the cards at that point. Was there anybody who's still here, I guess, who would like to speak to this this item, B2, the budget amendment? Okay. Seeing none, then I will ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that let's see here. I move the council close the public hearing and adopt an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2019-20 final budget of Salt Lake City as proposed by the administration.
Is there a second?
Just a second. Can
Yes.
we double check this? Could you close it? There's some follow-up information
For sure.
that is due to you for your next meeting. So just close it for tonight. We gave you the wrong motion sheet.
Okay, yeah,
Thank
I
you.
rescind that prior motion, and I move the council close the public hearing and refer the item to a future date.
We have a motion by Councilmember Rogers, a second by Councilmember Fowler. Any discussion on this motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Items B4 through B8 relate to grant applications and will be heard as one public hearing tonight. And I do have some cards, it looks like. We will start with George Chapman, followed by Cedar Gonzalez.
I need to preface my comments to ensure that the chance of me getting killed because of my comments is decreased. I fought the closing of the road home alone at the legislature against HB 414, Gibson. Nobody else was there. So anybody who wants to attack me for seeming to be anti-homeless, come at me and I'll take you on, because you weren't around back in 2016 when this all started. With respect to the grant application, one of the grants you're looking for is to hire 2 people for engagement, community engagement for the homeless in the Homeless Resource Center. But the communities are upset because they don't want more engagement. They want solutions when the homeless that are not really homeless, but they're just hanging out to be with their friends in the shelters, and they're defecating on sidewalks. And when we had this meeting last week with the community, they were saying, what do we do about defecation on sidewalks? And the person that supposedly is hired to work with the community is saying, we don't do that. Well, somebody needs to do that. You have a clean team to do something like that. You close the porta potties when people do need to use them. So now we need porta potties near the Homeless Resource Center. So what I'm trying to tell you is the grant application should be flexible enough to pay for the clean team or porta potties or something around the communities that are being impacted by the Homeless Resource Center. Because all they're going to end up doing is hating homeless. And that's the last thing we want to do. So please make the grant application and the funding flexible to allow some portion of it to be used to actually mitigate the problems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cedar Gonzalez? Please correct me if I mispronounced your name.
You're good, that's perfect. Thank you guys so much for your time and for your patience on hearing people that are really passionate about the homeless population. I also am passionate about the homeless population. And one thing that I will speak to on item number 4, I believe that having more funding for VOA to go out with police, having social workers with police officers would be incredibly beneficial. What this gentleman said earlier, with people, homeless people in the parks, homeless people are, they are incredibly vulnerable. And yes, like people who are dealing drugs will absolutely prey on people with high vulnerability. If we have social workers that accompany the police that are trained in de-escalation techniques and are familiar with the population, then we could actually get somewhere with people who, the reality is that not everyone wants to stay in shelter. Regardless of the bed deficit, which I will speak on in another comment, some people just don't want to stay in shelter, and that should be okay. Whether it's because of a severe persistent mental illness, some people don't want to stay in a shelter with 300 other men. Some people don't want to sleep in a bedroom or a dorm with 40 other men, especially if you have schizophrenia or, some kind of personality disorder. It's hard. And we should have more outreach for people who do not want to stay in shelter. If we provided more funding for Volunteers of America to go out with police, then we could provide more services to people who are generally service resistant and who just don't get caught within the net of services because they don't stay in shelter. So I appreciate your guys' consideration on this, and I want to advocate for the grant. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last card we have tonight. Anybody else want to speak to this particular motion? This item, excuse me. All right, seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move the council close the public hearing and refer items B4 through B8 to a future consent agenda for action.
We have a motion by Councilmember Rogers, a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. We are at potential action items. Our first item is regarding an ordinance for an alley closure at approximately 1000 South between 800 West and Jeremy Street. Do we have anybody here who wants to speak to us tonight? Okay. Okay, nobody? We have, okay. Well, seeing none, do we have a motion tonight? I can't make a motion myself, so I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm okay, I'll make one.
Yeah.
I move the council adopt the proposal and request that an ordinance be drafted to vacate an alley between 800 West and Jeremy Street and between Fayette Avenue and Dalton Avenue.
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Rogers, a second by Councilmember Fowler. Is there discussion on this item? Okay. We'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. We are now at item C2 regarding an ordinance amending the final budget of Salt Lake City, including the employment staffing document for fiscal year 2019-2020.
Mr. Chair, I move the council adopt an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2019-2020 final budget of the Salt Lake City as proposed by the administration, and one council added item is shown on the motion sheet, which is I-1 Northwest and North Point Small Area Plan Update of $50,000.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Rogers, a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion on this?
Just one, I need to make a point of clarification. 50,000 comes from the general fund balance and 50,000 comes from the airport.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on this? All right, seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Item C3 is regarding an ordinance amending the zoning of property located at 504 South 900 East Street and amending the Central Community Master Plan future land use map. Anybody who wants to discuss this today? No?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending the future land use map of the Central Community Master Plan and rezoning the property located at 504 South 900 East to RMU 35, subject to the applicant and the administration entering into a development agreement to be recorded against the property that requires 1, ground floor commercial space that will not exceed 1,000 square feet, 2, remove a curb cut on the north side of the property and restore the area to a landscaped park strip with trees that meet Salt Lake City urban forestry requirements and grow to a minimum height of 50 feet, and 3, charge additional rent for the use of dedicated parking stalls within the project area and seek or identify alternative parking solutions as needed.
Do I see a second? We have a motion by Councilmember Fowler, a second by Councilmember Luke. Any discussion on this from the council? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. I forgot we were not in the public hearing anymore. These are action items. And we are now to comments section of our agenda. Are there any questions of the mayor, or in this case, Deputy Chief of Staff Litvak? Thank you for being here, by the way. Anyone? Okay. We are at item D2. We'll be taking general comments now. Oh, excellent. This could take a long time or none at all. We're going to call people two at a time, and if you're here, please just let me know. I'll probably move these a little quicker than usual to see who's still in the building. Again, 2 minutes per person. You cannot combine time with another speaker. As a reminder, please help keep a civil and respectful meeting. We are going to start here with Kevin Leacaster. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you so much for listening to my concerns about the climate crisis again. Although I'm leaving the wonderful city of Salt Lake without having succeeded in clearing out much of our air pollution, it's consoling that our city council and mayor's office are as committed champions as I am. The city alone can't manage to accomplish transitioning off fossil fuels as quickly as we need to at this late stage, though. Increasing the public push for clean solutions is the only way we'll transform our entire economy off of dirty energy and time. My work with our national and local legislators is bearing fruit, but this too is taking too long in the face of our shrinking carbon budget, which is why I've spent the last year working to help build the youth climate movement too. While the Greta Thunberg effect has been marvelous to watch, it too hasn't proven powerful enough to push our politicians past the entrenched fossil fuel interest yet. For example, the young climate striker Haven Coleman I've been following posted pictures of huge crowds when our young Swedish friend was in town, but the post from the following week was about a dozen strikers. Our experience here has been similar. While we had maybe 2,000 people at the Utah Capitol on September 20th, the number of strikers there on any of the subsequent Fridays hasn't exceeded 100. To get our legislators to take meaningful climate action to pull us out of the fossil fuel age might take tens of thousands of strikers on the Hill at the next big strike on December 6th, and then maybe hundreds of thousands on Earth Day. While the youth will have to work to motivate their parents and grandparents to show up for their future, a step that the city could take would be to join with 52 other local governments in the U.S. to declare a climate emergency. I've submitted a template for a climate emergency declaration from the Climate Mobilization Campaign, along with a copy of Fort Collins' resolution for the council and mayor to consider adopting in whatever form they choose. I've struck through the one whereas that I would strike, but of course you're our elected representatives, so it's up to you. Related to this question about our proposed December 6th climate strike, it appears I could use some assistance. It seems that I needed to submit a demonstration permit request to March
Time.
on Main Street a week ago, and spontaneous one is in 14 days. So I've submitted that information and for your approval, participation and promotion as you feel fit. Thanks again, Kevin Leacaster, a very concerned citizen.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up, I have Kelly O'Neill. Barely noticeable. Andrew Noyes. Amanda, no last name. Damon Harris. Marvin Oliveris. Logan Millett. Cammie Henderson. Jeff A. Diego Gabriel. Leo Rogers. Thanks, Leo.
Evening, y'all. Leo Rogers, as previously mentioned. Thank y'all for having a little public comment section tonight. I really appreciate it. That being said, I did come up here planned with a whole hellfire and brimstone kind of speech that would make my Catholic ancestors blush. I'm going to forego that with just a little bit of a caveat of, y'all know why this happens, right? I know you're not answering because this isn't a back and forth, so I'll just go ahead and say no. And it's probably because people don't really trust this body to do anything much, to be frank. There's not a lot of faith in the council, nor the mayor's office, and that's not going to change with new council members or a new mayor, unfortunately. Whether that's from the inland port, the road home, the theater, the whole police car scandal thing that's now occurring. There's a lot of issues with our local government, and 90% of them will boil down to y'all are just not accessible enough for anybody to really bother. This can all be really avoided if y'all at least go a little bit further to pretend that you care. I know that y'all probably really care about what you do, but there's a lot of us that can't engage in these regularly. Up until about 3 months ago, I would never be able to come to this, ever. So most people can't. Most people are working. Most people have children. So moving these around to different times, letting people show up, just having a general open session for people to come and complain at you. It'd do a lot to relieve tensions, and maybe you guys don't have people swarming the pulpit and standing on tables and yelling at you. Just a little observation from somebody. Feel free to not do anything.
Thank you. Adam Guyman. Maria Fralick. Is it Fralick or Fralick? I'm sorry. Fralick.
So I wanted to address also this issue of our neighbors experiencing homelessness. My family has worked side by side with many of these neighbors at the Good Samaritan, at the Road Home, and at the Youth Resource Center. And it is alarming to note that the closure of the Road Home does come during our coldest months of the year. And it creates a tremendous burden on our human capital, on our social resources, and on our financial resources. It costs a lot more to jail and to hospitalize people than it does to provide adequate shelter. And for those who will not go to shelter, those outreach services can be funded at a significantly lesser cost than again, hospitalizing or jailing. I would echo the comments of increasing funds for case management, for trauma-informed social workers to participate in that outreach, for more porta potties in key areas, and I would echo the demands of the letter that was previously read of keeping the Road Home open through April, having a minimum of the equivalent number of beds made readily available and accessible prior to closing the Road Home, that no arrests, tickets, or harassment for campers until at least the equivalent number of beds are made readily available, a change change the existing legislation to allow for the new centers to have more beds, and work for free public transit fare for all people who stay in shelters. I know that you read that you are working with different organizations, that you can't do this alone, but I would ask that you use the power that you have collectively to really meet the needs of this population and to communicate back to the public how you intend to address these needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret Holloway, and then George Chapman after Margaret.
Change the topic. RDA had, you guys are all on the RDA, and I read in the Building Utah today. I understand the homeless issue. I listened to the work session today, but it's not the city's total responsibility. And they also promised everybody a bed out of the cold. So, but the RDA's talk about the public market. If you guys could please consider the Fair Park. You guys weren't interviewed for that article today, but the city's downtown is really, really pushing for it. And I want to just remind you that it was our emails and our letters to the council and to the mayor's office to get us noticed for the Fair Park. And I saw the designs for it, and it looks awesome. And I think it'll be a great benefit to the west side. Even with North Temple having all of its issues with the Gateway and Econo Lodge and all the people staying in there, it might help, it may not, I don't know. But I just wanted to say that if you guys could just please remember that. We spoke up. They have a lot of money downtown, and a Pioneer Park have their $3,000 a month apartments. The west side doesn't have that. But we really spoke up, and we really, really asked for that. And if the RDA could please just remember that. It was the people that spoke up, and you guys heard us. So before you make any decisions, whether or not who's going to get it, or if both of us are going to get it, I don't know. And I know it's not till next year. But I think it'll really help the west side a lot. But thank you.
Thank you. George Chapman, followed by Ian Decker.
First of all, those who want to engage in discussions with you, I encourage all of you to attend the community councils. Most of the council members attend regularly, and you do engage in arguments with us regularly. Thank you for listening, and thank you for arguing with us. But I know you're working on trying to keep the road home open. Thank you very much for that. But I also want to remind you that storage for the homeless has been full for a couple of years. We've been fighting for that without results. You really need to do something about that, because that's still a problem. There shouldn't be people walking around with shopping carts. And you also have 7 of 15 acres in the Depot District that you own. Most of it's vacant, has been vacant for decades. So why can't you open up a building there and let the homeless camp out if they don't want to go to the road home? Again, you can do something, and I'd like you to do a little bit more. You know me, I want more. I urge you to do more on that. It needs more. I know you're trying. I also need to point out that you can ticket idling diesel trucks with one warning now. So if you want to clean up the air in the inland port, if you want to get leverage with the legislature, sorry, James, if you want to get leverage with the legislature, start ticketing idling diesel trucks. It's real simple, and that'll clean the air, of course. And finally, I want to see cops in parks on electric scooters.
Thank you, George. Ian Decker.
Right now, I either start laughing or crying.
Brooks. Bryn Dayton. Hannah Wolfson. The Ian Decker again, I believe. Antonio. Nathan, I'll say Kohler, sorry. Bernie Hart. And then after Bernie is Cedar Gonzalez again.
I've been to a number of these meetings and speaking about homelessness and my concerns about it in the city for quite a while now, and it felt good to not be alone. Too many nights I was here alone addressing some of the issues and asking for the council to pay attention to what was happening in the city, because I was trying to draw attention to things that were happening that weren't effective. There was a lot of people that care. I may get after David and VOA in different places, but I never questioned the fact that they care, and they're trying to do something helpful to help a very vulnerable population. But I do question and rile against the effectiveness of what they're doing. I do not believe what they're doing is helping solve the problem. They're just moving the problem around and putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and the methods they're using are totally ineffective. In the meeting this afternoon, somebody mentioned the power of funding. You have the power to fund. People have to come to you for money. I am going to ask you to set up a series of standards by which that they have to meet before you give them funding. When they say they can accomplish something and they can move people into housing and housing works, the housing program is the worst in the West. If they say people are going into addiction and addiction works, get the numbers. If they say they can transition people out of the shelters in 90 days and they're no longer homeless, get their names and find the information and see if it works. Use the power of funding to collect data, which doesn't exist in the system, to demonstrate that what the service providers are saying actually works. That is the best thing you could ever do for the homeless, because the homeless get blamed for the failures of the system. And if the system can't help them, we can't blame the homeless for what is out there. They're mentally ill and they're addicted, and the system is not helping them. Use the power, please use the power of your funding to put things in place that measure the effectiveness of what the service providers are saying they can do. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bernie. Cedar? And it looks like Deja, but it could be Deja. I'm sorry. Gaston.
Hello again. To kind of piggyback on the funding, we definitely need a lot more funding. $1 million was recently given to rapid rehousing programs for up to 9 months. I think that that is a really wonderful start. However, I do feel that it was a little bit of the city kind of covering their butts because of the massive outcry, because people don't want to see people freeze to death this winter. I do not advocate for the road home staying open. I realize that that is not a realistic solution, and it's something that's already kind of said and done. I do advocate, however, for more beds to be put in the resource centers. Those resource centers are huge, and if you guys can do anything about the occupancy maximums, there is room for more people. It is not a long-term solution to homelessness. However, it is often the stepping stone that homeless individuals need to move on to housing. We expected this deficit in beds. It should not have come to a surprise to anyone. And we desperately need more beds to be allocated in those shelters. As a longer-term solution, like I said, that $1 million is a godsend for rapid rehousing, but that needs to be ongoing. That should not just be a one-time thing as a reaction to the people demanding a solution this winter. If ongoing funding could be given to rapid rehousing, that would really help, as well as permanent supportive housing. I know that we have several permanent supportive housing locations going up. I would like to advocate for more locations and vouchers. Thank you.
Thank you. Deja or Deja? No? How about Thomas Cantrell?
I'd like to add my chant. Thank you. You were brilliant. You've done hard work and deep research. James, thank you. Andrew, thank you. Anna, thank you. Charlie, thank you. Amy, thank you. Anybody makes you cry again, they're going to answer to me. And of course, Aaron and Chris are off doing their thing. I was homeless in 1983. Not addicted, not mentally ill. Of course, you might argue with that one. But because of issues of housing rights and employment rights, I spent a year on the streets of Salt Lake City. You are doing more today by 1,000 times than has ever been done before. Controversial, perhaps. Difference of opinion, absolutely. But thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. That is the last card I have for general comments tonight. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to us? Even though there's time, probably not. I'm sorry. Thanks for asking, though. Yeah, come on up and just state your name, and then we'll have you do a card afterwards.
Hi, my name's Caitlin Lech. I'm a resident of Liberty Wells. I just want to bring attention to something that hasn't been mentioned much tonight, given that we've just had a week of our first inversion of the season. As I look at this map of the area of Salt Lake City, I see that the air quality on the west side is 20 to 40 units worse than the air quality on the east side of Salt Lake City. This is a public health crisis. I'd really, really like to see the council do more to address this, not just from a local perspective. I just read a study that 72 people will die because of our air quality this year. If it had met better standards, that wouldn't happen. If 72 people were murdered, that would be considered the foremost issue. I want to encourage you to think about this really, really, really strongly and do something about it. I know that it is something that we experience all winter long, and it's not only a public health crisis, but it's also, we heard people come up here today and say that marginalized people experience things on a different level, and this is one of them. And I'd like to see the council do more to address this from multiple different facets. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak tonight? Who hasn't had a chance already? I'm sorry. All right, come on up. Okay. Angela, is that you? Yes. Okay. Welcome, Angela. And then followed by Ali.
Hi, my name's Angela. I live in the Marmalade District. My concern, and this is something that I've talked to some of the people in City Council and some of however many people were running for mayor. It's an issue I brought up to them as well. Is diversifying the police force with the application questions that are asked. So I didn't want to be on the police force, but I did look at the application, and some of the questions that it does ask, it sort of seems like it's filtering people out. For instance, one of the questions that's asked is, have you ever paid rent late? Have you ever paid a bill late? Have you ever had a medical bill or some sort of bill go into collection? And if you answer some of those questions in a manner that's not appropriate, it will say you cannot do the application until another 2 years. And that's, as someone who's seen the FBI application, that's stricter than what the FBI asks to do their general application. So I'm just bringing this to your attention if none of you guys are aware of this. I do feel like if some of those questions were asked differently or not asked at all, you can possibly get younger people on the police force and people who possibly look like me. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Ali?
Thank you. Well, you have to be here, so I don't know why I said thank you for coming. I, like everyone else who protested, I am passionate about homelessness and the road home, but I also understand that nothing's going to get done if I'm just yelling and making Instagram-worthy posts. So I know going forward, I work in this field that the road home is not going to be open. I just ask that in the future, it seems like what happens, this city and the state makes one step forward, but then takes 5 steps back. Oh, we'll give you funding for housing vouchers, perfect, but we're gonna slash funding in half for case management. So you have housing vouchers that are going unused. Or we'll give you money for case management, but we won't give you any funds for housing or barrier relief funds or application fees. Just going forward, making sure that the pieces fit and goes together. And then I wanna comment, I think I can make 2. I'm still in my 2 minutes.
You got 2 minutes.
Yeah, about the proposal amendment to have increasing the police to Liberty Park area. A lot of people talked about how it's going to affect the marginalized communities or communities of color. I just want to advocate that moving forward in the hiring process, hiring people from the community is because that is going to help with the relationship with the community and then build trust, as well as it can help with community development instead of gentrification, which would happen. So just moving forward, just making sure that you're not basically taking one step forward and cutting one back, and then just advocating, like what Angela was saying, for more people of diversity, not necessarily skin color, ethnicity, but from different backgrounds who will be on the police force, because if they're from the community, they can better help the community, then there won't be any issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is the last card I have now. Anyone else who'd like to speak who hasn't had a chance yet? Okay. Yes.
I have a point of privilege.
Please, go ahead.
I feel like I should probably explain my emotional crying up here since it already was brought out once. Thank you, and I appreciate it. Not everyone obviously that was here was in the room, but for everyone that spoke and that we were able to hear, and I wish that we could have heard everyone in a way that was respectful and allowed us to be able to hear everyone. I agree with the sentiments of how people feel, and it's emotional because I know that the 7 of us on this council and the administration do stay up late at night wondering how we're going to save people from freezing to death on the streets. Because I've texted and said, what are we going to do and how are we going to fix this? And so I know that we are there late nights working hard, and each of us in our own capacities do other things in the community besides just volunteer to be here and make these difficult decisions. Not volunteer, I mean, we get elected, whatever, but it's emotional because I agree with all of that, and I know how difficult that this is, and I think there are ways to work together as a community to really start to address it. And unfortunately, I completely understand the anger and the sentiment and the want to raise your voice, and I get that, but I feel so much that I wish everyone was still sitting here so that we could hear and have that dialogue together and could have that conversation together. And I hope that somebody's listening into like SLC TV that left our early because of that and is able to come back and reach out to us, because we are all available, and I do want and I do believe that this connection that we have together can make a change, and we're really striving and working hard to fulfill each of those capacities. And so sometimes my emotions just get to me and I can't help it, and I either better start laughing or I cry. So the crying won out today. So thank you for all of the community that was here and for being here, and I want to really encourage continuing these dialogues so we can help all of our community members. And thank you for allowing me this time.
Thank you, Councilmember Fowler. I endorse your comments fully. Anybody else before we move on to? All right, we have no new business tonight. However, we do have some unfinished business. Item F1 is
Mr. Chair.
regarding, yes.
I move that the council adopt an ordinance to establish a Fire Code Board of Appeals as listed on item F1 of the agenda.
Second.
Stole my thunder. We have a motion by Councilmember Luke, second by Councilmember Rogers. Any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. We are now at the
Mr. Chair, I
consent
move
portion
that
of our
we
agenda.
Approve the consent agenda.
I will look for a motion to approve the consent agenda. We have a motion by Councilmember Luke, a second by Councilmember Rogers. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. This concludes our formal city council meeting. Thank you for attending, and this meeting stands adjourned.
Good to see you. Thank you, Rusty. Yeah, yeah.